From the moment Meghan Markle's name first blazed across theatrical tandems, nominations pending, list for the 2024 Tony Awards, controversy spontaneously combusted. While her revisionist, Princess Apart, production, an autobiographical Broadway musical hagiography about overcoming woke trauma amidst Britain's crassly mercantile monarchy, seemed tailor-made to appease intersectionality's ravenous appetite for content, other factions recoiled in instantaneous disgust. Rending a very fabric of American artistry to exalt her niche principality's petty self-reckoning above the infinite wellspring of resilience annealing minority performers? Inflammatory didn't begin covering mobilizing backlashes accusing Markle of appropriating the last remaining havens of rich, homegrown diverse creative expression even before initial voting rounds concluded. One of many reactionary fronts ready to levy cancellation forces against her inexorable rise to self-perpetuated ubiquity. How much more psychological waterboarding must the wider entertainment industry's vestiges of integrity endure from this vapid abuser duchess before we all awaken to her desperation pathology's depraved nihilism, fumed acclaimed character Dynamo Mercedes' role in one viral Vulture op-ed encapsulating the bulk of apprehensions. Meghan Markle represents a sociological parasite groomed by the most noxious dominance hustles to erode the legacy foundations evolved souls spent lifetimes building up ethical credibility upon. The Cosby graduate's scathing rebuke reflected just one pocket of disillusioned dissent boiling over from years of witnessing the polarizing Duchess monetize her melodramatic misery sabbatical from unloved wokeness after unloved wokeness around the world. For true vanguards having willingly risked destitution and persecution on righteous stages pursuing those same principles, Markle opted to art wash on the way to tax haven status. Her genre trespasses amounted to cultural atrocity on par with stolen valor. I resent having to continuously demand entertainment's gatekeepers display decisive custodial defense against these parasitic big tent cancers hijacking our revolutionary vernacular's deeper realities to reweave self-aggrandizing tapestries over centuries of sweat equity. Activist showrunner Iris Ornina Samos fumed to EW over Zoom from the besieged Gaza Strip. Look at how easily half these Hollywood colonizers were duped into sanctifying her particular brand of dollar store victimhood as revolutionary with no context into the actual existential stakes at play daily here. Indeed, the instant reverence bestowed upon Meghan Markle's Broadway excursion exemplified how so many institutional defenders of creatives' identities had been compromised into paving glorification pathways for ambitious celebrity personality cults by the slightest whiff of notoriety. Tony Committee spokespersons immediately praised the Duchess's oeuvre as an urgent, transcendent provocation deconstructing archaic social mores to attain higher consciousness, while producers like Ava DuVernay fawned over the enormously courageous story of emancipation and resilience in the face of systemic hatred brought to bear. Many reacted as if witnessing a blood libel renaissance unfold before their eyes, except this time engineered by intersectional mouthpieces under cultural siege themselves. As if the identity-framing arguments championed by woke ribbon collectives for generations hadn't already been perpetually undermined by posturing influencers jockeying to erect platform wealth off-ramps from all that rigorous self-analysis. And yet with Tea Times Musical Group, LLC chairing the Princess Apart creative team, the self-mythologizing class self-anthropology sermon seemed imperviously codified among Tony heredities under the banner of radical rebirth parables before mainstream release. No matter that seasoned BIPOC insiders warned their voting blocs were being played for identity colloques, and braced to mount fierce resistance campaigns, the second gatekeepers breached ethical overwatch protocols. Nor did castings of beloved thespian luminaries like Billy Porter as Meghan's fairy gunkle, spiritual guide and Brandy's greenhouse adjacent side piece soulmate lend any believability beyond merchandise drag parodies premeditatedly farting in the general direction of educational intent. Every layer of cultural capital swirling its fictional executions amounted to little more than reveling in the systematic profiteering of blackness's distorted caricature solely to promote commodified spectacle. And the more challenges allies raise about infinite identities being subversively condensed into a totalizing crossover mass for mainstream palatability, the louder these complicit arbiters shouted our critiques as irrational cancel crusaders intent on dismantling their unifying masterpieces. Critically acclaimed queer ballet director Francois Lautrex told NPR in reflection over the gathering tsunami. Structural dissolution is irreversible long before gatekeepers realize their naming rituals have already ossified into a nostalgized garbage crematorium oozing locust patron exhaust. Still, Nobody on the moral front lines could have possibly anticipated the colossal velocity at which Meghan Markle's juggernaut train would hurtle towards a toxic ubiquity polluting entertainment spheres not yet inoculated for her particular marketing strain. As sources embedded within theatrical tandem strategy rooms later leaked, Princess Depart's producing team of identity vultures had engineered an ingenious, multi-vector guerrilla super campaign blanketing every niche channel, from the Duchess Army enforcer pools to non-fungible mercenary battalions to integrated studio astroturfers. By default, anything uttered questioning their regent's authenticity or moral legitimacy was instantaneously translated into coordinate mass report spamming from all compromised vectors simultaneously, backed by military-grade server cyber ops capable of locking out dissent from marinating on any public channels. The goal being rapidly achieving terminal mass upon target audiences through overwhelming signal-to-noise bombardment until they eventually tapped out from objective evaluation towards one-sided self-promotion stenography. Yet for as unstoppable as Markle's encroachment seemed destined to become on paper, battle lines remained drawn by extremely formidable anti-entrenchment blocks sealed off from propaganda's penetration via closed-circuit forums and decentralized meshnet communications. Chief among them being the electoral legions comprising theatrical tandem's own fraternal council skeptics who effectively held bipartisan veto authority over entry of any disturbingly dubious candidates continuing through awards cycle gauntlets. According to the story, there were several major criticisms leveled against Meghan Markle's autobiographical Broadway musical, Princess Depart. Cultural appropriation. Many accused Markle of appropriating and commodifying struggles faced by minority performers and artists in order to exalt her own story of overcoming woke trauma within the British monarchy. Critics felt she was hijacking platforms and creative spaces built up over centuries by truly marginalized voices in order to put her own privileged experience on a pedestal. Self-aggrandizement. There was a perception that Princess Depart was little more than a self-mythologizing vanity project by Markle to reframe her narrative as one of heroic resilience and emancipation rather than examining her own complicity in systems of oppression. Veteran activists accused her of perpetuating a dollar store victimhood disconnected from actual existential realities faced globally. Oversimplification of identity. Critics slammed the musical for condensing infinite nuances of intersectional identities into a totalizing, commodified mass for mainstream commercial palatability. They argued this strategic flattening into caricatures for broad, crossover appeal actively subverted the educational intent behind highlighting marginalized experiences. Profiteering off blackness. Specific criticisms were aimed at elements like casting beloved black actors Billy Porter and Brandy in stereotypical, fairy gunkle, and side-piece soulmate roles that were seen as exploitative parodies reveling in the systematic profiteering and distortion of black identity solely to sell spectacle. Institutional appropriation. There were accusations that Markle's creative team deployed unethical guerrilla marketing tactics like mass reporting, cyber ops, and astroturfing to overwhelm spaces and fast-track the musical's path to legitimacy over objections. This was seen as an appropriation of the very institutional processes meant to safeguard integrity. In essence, the loudest detractors portrayed Princess Depart as an out-of-touch enterprise that amounted to a cultural atrocity by misappropriating revolutionary vernaculars and muddying pathways for genuine unheard voices seeking mainstream platforms.